What's up, everybody? My name is Mitch Dyer. Ryan McCaffrey is dead.
He's being a judge, like Judge Dredd or Judge Judy or Judge Wapner or Judge Reinhold.
Reinhold, that's a good one.
Remember
I like that last one.
That's
Judge Reinhold?
really good.
Yeah.
Marty,
we need William Hung to say
Marty, please welcome Marty Sleva, judge expert to the show,
thanks.
Podcast Unlocked. Joining him, as always, Destin Legary.
Did you ever see Clerks animated series with
Yeah,
Judge
with
Reinhold?
There's
That's
a
right.
lot
Is he in
of
it?
Judge Reinhold
Yeah.
jokes in that. Yeah.
Love that show.
He's right for
Yeah,
humor.
Nathan Vella, Capybara Games. Do you have any idea what's happening right now?
I got the Judge Reinhold thing.
That's as far as I got.
I'm a big Arrested
child.
Development fan.
Yeah.
But that's everything other than that. The before and the after, nothing.
Yeah.
I got
They
nothing.
don't have Judge Judy in Canada?
Yeah.
We
No,
actually,
they totally do. My grandfather watches it all the time. he watches Judge Show Brown.
I was gonna make
Judge
it. I was
Judy.
gonna try to figure out who actually was from Canada listening.
That's
and
how you
everyone
figure it
except
out.
for me
Yeah,
in this
two
room.
Canucks in here.
Yeah.
And
Should
I
we
have
get Naomi in
grandparents.
here
And
and
Nathan's
leave?
from Toronto. Yeah, that's great. We'll get an all-Canadian cast.
Yeah, that
Thanks for your
sounds
time. Please leave.
Wisconsin's kind of like Canada.
It's basically Canada Junior. We basically own you.
Oh, or Canada is Wisconsin Senior.
I don't think so.
Wait, that's the same thing, I think.
That was a harsh burn, man. Sick burn.
Special guest Nathan Vella. Thank you for joining us. You're here because you make video games.
We do.
You made a video game this week.
Yes, we have a video game that is either coming out or out, depending on when
This
this
is probably
airs.
going to go
You
up on
made it in a
Wednesday.
week?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've been talking about it for so many years.
It is-
I got like 12 different emails from people that were like, I've been following this game for 7 years. I'm like,
No.
like, okay, it's been a while. We've been working on it for a while, but you're really going to throw 7 at me?
Seven's a lofty number.
We get it. We
That's
took a
bold
while.
claim.
But
Yeah.
7 years. Come
I'm
on.
fine with taking a while, but 7's pushing
Yeah.
it a little bit.
So finally, after 7 years,
Yes.
Super Time Force.
Super Time
is
Force
upon
on
us.
Xbox 360 and Xbox One today or tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It is extremely likely
Wednesday,
it's
May
out by the
14th.
time you're hearing
Yes.
this.
May
'cause I'm
14th.
Very lazy and not.
We
Mitch
use
can't edit.
dates. We
Yeah.
use specific numbers.
Yeah, this podcast will probably be deleted because everything Mitch touches burns.
Yeah, this might be an enormous waste of our time. We'll find out.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
So reviews are coming out today.
Yes.
They're pretty good.
Apparently,
You made a good game.
I thought so. I knew so, but it's nice to have people tell me that.
Sure. Sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees.
No,
That's a saying.
releasing games is an extremely stressful thing, and there's a lot of anxiety involved, and you put a lot of work and you risk a lot launching something. And you tell yourself that it doesn't matter. Like, it's just about the process and the people, but it's really nice to get a lot of people who have a lot of sway understanding what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing, like, everybody loves a good review score, don't get me wrong. And, you know, if it was a 9 and it said this game is great and that was the entire piece, people would probably be pretty stoked. But I think people have kind of, like, what we thought was rad about the game, I think people caught it too. And that's, you never really know, right? Like, the same thing happened to us with Sorcery, the same thing happened to us with Clash of Heroes. They're different games. They're not easy games to look at and be like, oh, obviously it's good. There's, you know, you run and jump and shoot. Time Force is a relatively challenging game from like a whole bunch of, like, from a theoretical perspective. It deals with time travel in a very real way, but also it's, you know, it's an old school style. I'm air quoting and you can't see it, or maybe you
Maybe
can.
you can.
But it's not about old school at all. It's not about being retro for retro's sake or anything like that. It's about trying to mash the two things together, and the fact that people picked up on that matters a lot to us.
Yeah, and
because
I
that's
think
what we're trying to do.
The most interesting thing to me about it is it has that retro visual style, right? There's like all these like awesome 8-bitty kind of bleeps and bloops and sound effects, and it does have that, like, remember video games, how cool they were? But then the mechanics of it and the way it functions moment to moment, it's like impossibly, like, you just could never have done that
Impossibly modern.
before now.
Yeah.
And that's
it is definitively new.
and that's why it took a long time. Like,
Yeah.
that's, I mean, it's a very
7 years.
It's 9 years ago when we started. No, it is a very challenging thing to make, to try to, and that's what we try to do as a studio. And it's what we've always tried to do is, you know, take something that might be familiar and twist it on its end. And that game matters a lot to our studio because of how far we tried to push something that could have been super simple and stupid. But also because of, like, the way that it started at the studio, the fact that it was just a couple of guys hanging out at a jam, and now there's a full 5-hour video game based on a game that Ken and Mike and Vic made in 3 days at TO Jam. Like, it seems so, like, it seems ridiculous in a lot of ways, but that's the kind of beauty of the time that we're working in, right? Where a crazy idea crunched out in 3 days can, like a couple years later, become an Xbox One, Xbox 360 title. That's pretty cool to me.
Can we go back? So you called it T.O. Jam?
Yeah.
If you say Toe Jam,
Stop it.
I start thinking of Toe Jam and Earl.
Yeah,
Remember
that's
those
why I
guys?
specifically say T.O. Jam.
Yeah, that was an Xbox game. The third one, it was like Return to Funkatron.
Are you making this up?
No, that was an original Xbox game. You remember that?
That was like OG Xbox.
That was OG
yeah.
Xbox. Yeah.
Xbox One, we call it.
No,
Oh,
you can't.
no.
You call it the One Xbox.
Shoot. No.
Yeah, that was a game. That was a weird game. I'm glad.
I think a lot of people forgot that game even existed.
I 100% did.
It fell into that 3D character platformer abyss, along with Voodoo Vince
And Munch and
Munch
Azaric.
and our good friend Blinks.
Yeah,
Oh,
RIP.
no. Like I had a stopwatch going. About
Yeah,
6 minutes.
7
until
minutes.
Blinks
7
happened.
minutes.
Yeah,
I
it
had
just made a
6.
whole lot of people, including Phil Spencer, feel really awkward. Right?
Good. Well, we bring that game up on the show every week specifically for Phil,
Yeah.
who likes to remind us there was a Blinks 2.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't remember that.
even know
Yeah,
that.
no, I don't know. Too many cats. Yeah, so I first played Super Time Force. I think it was PAX Prime 2012. I want to say.
Yep.
And the game, it was one of those things I fell in love with right away. But the game, there's differences in the game now. Like, you've
huge
changed
ones. Yeah.
rules of the game. You've changed scenes.
Yeah, there was a time where like we saw the game and I saw you months later and was like, "Oh, how's Super Time Force going?" And you said, "Oh, it's a totally different game now."
Yeah.
And I was like, "There's no way," and it
Yeah.
was. It was
So
completely different.
What's that process like, and what was that like?
The original Jam game had the like time rewinding, multiple characters coming back in, playing alongside your past selves. But it had the mechanic was entirely based on you play, you die, auto rewind back to the start, and then you play again.
Yeah.
And so there was this like complete lack of control, complete lack of like you have time travel except you can't actually control any element of it.
Yeah.
Time travel is just a thing that happened in the game. And we could have finished that game. I mean, I think that would have been a fun little game. And nobody on the team wanted that. Chris, our creative director, was really vehement about like this is a bigger idea. This is not just a like thing that just happens and it's a fun little, splody thing.
Yeah.
He sat down and worked with a bunch of the guys, and it was before PAX East 2012. We call it the PAX of Legend, where 2 weeks before we showed, that was when the idea of like scrubbing through like a VHS, being able to choose your moment to come back in, being able to press a button to actually enter timeout mode. That was when it got solidified, and we implemented that massive core change to the game in a very short period of time. And
This
that
was 2 weeks before PAX.
That was basically 2 weeks before
All right.
PAX Prime 2012, I think.
It's going in
Or
hot.
PAX East, sorry, PAX East 2012. Yeah, oh gosh. Yes, 3 people overnighting in a hotel in Boston, showing the game the next day. That's not something I would recommend anybody doing. But the end result was that we took away the complete lack of control. Like there was a point early on where you could go like 95% through a level, make a dumbass mistake. Oh, guess what? Got to do it all over again. Even though your run was 99% perfect, you get massively penalized, and death felt like a punishment. It felt like a pain that you had to experience because you weren't good enough. The shift to being able to control time and go in and out how you want meant that time was a weapon for
Yeah.
you. It's a tool. Death becomes a gameplay element instead of a punishment for sucking at gameplay.
Yeah,
And
there's
that
a lot
was-
of times and a lot of reasons you might deliberately die.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, sure.
And we really, really want people to play it how they want to play it.
How'd you come up? Sorry.
Go hit it. No,
How'd you
hit
come up with the concept? Like, was it influenced by a real life thing where you're like, I wish I could rewind time and have a buddy and redo that?
So T.O. Jam that
Tell us
year,
about the big regret in your life that you wish you could undo.
The dark side.
Let's get real
of game
for a minute.
development.
Imagine I started bawling profusely.
Whoa, man!
We should not
Now
make
it
this
got
awkward. There was a body in the ditch.
The T.O. Jam theme, like T.O. Jam and a lot of game jams have themes. They kind of try to like solidify, give people like some kind of framework to work in. And the theme that year was what just happened. And so Kenneth, lead programmer, co-designer on the game, kind of thought, well, like, what if you were playing alongside what just happened consistently? Like, what if you're playing your cooperative players were what just happened? And so that little concept turned into the basic idea, which turned into the much bigger idea that turned into the game that is now out. Which
And
is
lo,
insane.
11 years later, here we are.
Wow, this has been a really long podcast. It's just weirdly, I don't know, weird synchronicity to me that the first sort of major indie game of the 360 was Braid. That was sort of the thing that put indie games on the map, and that's one of the stepping stones that got us to where we are today. And arguably the last big indie game of the 360 is going to be Super Time Force, which is also dealing with like, you know, where if Braid is marrying Super Mario Brothers with the time travel mechanic, then this is marrying Contra with the time travel mechanic. And so I feel like it's almost fitting that you know, we're starting and ending the 360's, you know, long life as a you know, great indie platform. With,
Chris has a great quote, and that quote is, "Super Time Force is not what happens when Contra and Braid have a baby. It's what happens when Contra and Braid have a party."
That's really good.
All right. Copyright 2014, Chris Piotrowski.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's really interesting to us too, because I will argue that N Plus was the first big.
That's true.
And it does get overlooked because it was, you know, obviously Braid sold way more, but N Plus, from our friends Metanet that are, you know, their office is not too far away from ours, and they were the part of the reason why we even started making independent games.
They're the Earl to your Toe Jam.
Yeah, exactly. Let's bring it all back. I like this.
All right, I guess we could call that a callback.
Yeah, it's just looping back to be strange. So yeah, it's very interesting to me that like a platformer, even though N Plus is very different than Time Force, but platformer like N Plus, platformer like Braid, then kind of bookending, maybe. We'll see. I think we're still going to see some other really rad stuff on 360 because that platform's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
That's got a pretty good install base.
It's still, people are still buying them.
Yeah. Still had that Dark Souls.
You mentioned before that you had this whole mechanic where you would go and you would go and you would go and you would die and you go all the way back to the start. Sounds a lot like Below.
Yes.
So how are you? That's your guys' next game.
Yes.
How are you avoiding the same problem, right? Like that frustrating, like, I got all the way there and now I'm dead and now I have to go do all this garbage again.
In Below, you don't have to go do it again, and that's a very, like, it's really strange. We didn't even really think much about it, but we are playing a lot with like death as gameplay in both of our games, even though they're like the most polar opposite of games that could come from the studio. And
Chris needs a hug.
yeah, he's got
let's make a bunch of games about death.
He makes a lot of soup though.
He
I follow
does.
him on Instagram. He's always making soup.
Making soups all
delicious.
the time.
yeah, he's got some soup recipes. His mom and grandmother have like serious soup
Coming
recipes.
soon, Super Time Force.
Oh God!
Mic drop.
I didn't expect that from you. Of all people in this room,
that was
I
some
did not
Destin Legaria level trash right there.
Jeez.
I don't even know where to go from there, Mitch.
What were we talking about? Your
Below.
video game,
Throughout
I
the
guess.
whole thing.
Below.
It's so it is in Below. The idea is that you're playing after the life that you just played. So it's not this kind of like loop of start, do something, die, start all over again. It's actually like a chronological thing. You're arriving at the island after your last life. It might have been a day, it might have been a year. You don't really know, and you'll never know. But the fact that it happens later means that the stuff that you did, the past life, still affects the world and can still, represent progress.
Yeah.
So you
Traps are still triggered, and that
Yeah.
body is still there.
Yeah, you found a rad weapon and then died 10 levels down. Go find it. It's probably still there, unless someone else found it or like some
Jerks.
random fucking animal ate it or something like that. Because that it is a.
Can
we
animals
are.
eat weapons?
I might be stretching that a little. They might be able to do something. With
I love the
weapons,
idea
who
that you like find a dog and cut it open and there's a giant crossbow in its stomach.
knows? That dog has no teeth at all. It's just really unhappy. No, it's the idea behind. Like, I mean, Super Time Force is really trying to make death into something that can be fun, and Below, it's meant to be harsh and punishing. And it's like, if you die because of the way that you bleed in the game, any kind of like attack that you take from an enemy, anytime you don't block an attack and you get hit, starts you bleeding, even if it's a tiny little prick, and you will die if you don't deal with it. And so it becomes this kind of like stress of how to deal with taking damage that will eventually lead to death. And the fact that you do die a lot is a very key part of Below as well. It is about trying to build upon the life that came before you and slowly and progressively get better at the game through learning it for yourself rather than through having somebody hold your hand through it.
I like that. That's super rad.
Me too.
It's a pretty big tonal shift though from what you guys did with, you know, from Critter Crunch to Sorcery to, you know, Super Time Force and out of Below. Like, is that something you guys like sort of pride yourselves on, is being able to provide experiences that are like remarkably different from each other?
It's extremely so. I think that, we've never really done a sequel, although I would love to at some point. It'd be way easier. we've never really done the same genre. We've never really tried to, we're always starting from scratch. And it's really, it's a huge challenge for the studio, and I think that's part of the reason why our games take a little longer than maybe we'd like and maybe our fans would like. But I think the end result is that we never get stuck, as a one-trick pony or doing something that we get bored with. We're always choosing what games we do and pushing those games hard because of our interest in actually making them, because of how friggin' fun it is to make Super Time Force, or how obscenely challenging design-wise or artistically it is to make Below. Those challenges are why I think a lot of us enjoy working at the studio. There's a lot of other places that these amazingly talented people could be making games, but I think a big reason why they are here and have been here for a really long time is because it's always something kind of different. And I don't know if there's there's no way of me saying this without sounding like a cocky douche, but I don't think there's a lot of other studios out there making 2 games at the same time that are that crazily different. And that's why we do it. We're 22 people. There's maybe 3 of us who, prior to Capy, had ever made video games before.
Jeez.
It's a bunch of fresh perspectives on the stuff that we're making, and lots of us have been together for 6, 7, 8 years, and that team, that kind of relationship between people, the fact that everybody's friends but also colleagues and also willing to call bullshit whenever anybody throws bullshit out, that's what I like about making games. I like if I was to throw out the whole game side of it and still get to go to work with those people every day, it'd still be pretty okay. It's better with games, but
we're gonna go make shoes.
Yeah, actually, that's a great idea.
Yes.
Yeah,
you can have that one for free.
Super Time Force.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I'm actually
That's 2. What else can we do? Keep it going.
I was going to ask. We see a lot of games dealing with this issue of death or time, or like Infinity Blade, you die but you carry over your XP. Zombie U, where you can find your old dead body. Do you think it's just game designers looking at new ways to deal with death in games?
I think part of it is that. Part of it is seeing what has been done well and trying to think about it from a Switch perspective, a different angle. Because let's face it, you kind of die in almost every game ever.
Yeah.
But those, Zombie U is an amazing example of a game that could have been kind of meddling and bland, but death is kind of what makes it fun and interesting. And I think that is very influential to. It's very hard to find a cultural form, I think, that doesn't have some kind of one-upsmanship almost in the creative process. Oh, those guys did that. What if we maybe there's a better way?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a different way. And I think that is a part of it. With Below, because we started the concept so long ago, pre-Demon Souls concept, and we actually prototyped it pre-Demon Souls, which is really weird to think about because of...
That was 12 years ago.
Glad you came by.
Time is really weird in this room.
I did this to myself. I set this all up. Perfectly. Yeah, I think it's really interesting for us because I think between Time Force and Below there are those weird kind of commonalities, but despite them being super separate games, but having started and worked on those games, it would be very easy for us to.
How rude! Feel free to just take a phone call in the middle of this podcast.
Sorry, guys.
That's probably not important. As you're shipping a game.
That was Phil Spencer.
Yeah. What's up, Phil? No, we haven't talked about Blinks yet.